yeah, typically that is a distress call, and she's probably a bit distressed because, well, actually, she was doing this before I came, and the irony is, when there's a distress call, you can home into where it's coming from very easily. I'm going to leave little Screech to herself, but yeah, the irony is, I say, a predator can home in very quickly to the distress call because of the noise, but it's also a signalling sort of tactic for other squirrels, and they sort of verbalise things in lots of different ways, different calls, twitching tails, stomping feet, you know, all sorts of things. They're fascinating creatures, and I'm very blessed to live where I am, because I have a park behind my little paradise. And yeah, it's lovely. And this is where Squidge, our squirrel, came from. So I like to think that Squidge was a baby when we got her. She never had any children of her own, because obviously we weren't allowed to release her. She wouldn't have been releasable. She was too tame to, you know, initially we thought she was a rat, like we said. We weren't going to have her put down, because just no, that's not going to happen. I'd rather go to prison, to be honest, and pay a big fine. But yeah, Squidge never had any baby squirrels, because yeah, she was a captive squirrel, because we weren't allowed to release her, and she was too trusting, and you know, predators, and no, she would have perished very quickly. But I like to think that you know, Screech and the other squirrels we see, and sort of running around in the trees at the moment playing, and it's lovely to see. I like to think that they are sort of distant cousins or something, squirrel cousins. But yeah, it's nice to think that, because they could very well be. Grey squirrels typically have 2 mating seasons in the year. You know, that they can have, you know, 2, 3, 4. You know, I don't know what the limit is, or if there is a limit. You know, they're good breeders. You know, and that's why people don't like them. I adore them, I really do. Look, I've got a squirrel tattoo on my forearm. That was Squidge, and my wife also has a tattoo on her upper arm. So people blame grey squirrels for the demise of the red, and I know this is a totally different subject to fixing Chinese bed frames, but they blame the demise of the red because of the grey, and that's, yes, there is truth in it. Yes, there is squirrel pox and you know, other things, and I don't deny that. But you got to bear in mind that up until probably the late 70s, there was still a bounty on squirrel tails, you know, to prove that you've killed a squirrel. And that wasn't for grey squirrels, that was for red squirrels. Because the same argument was used back then as it is used now. They're bad for the trees, they ruin the trees, they spoil the trees, disease, blah blah blah. Okay, no, in my eyes, no. Oh, I've got a low battery warning. I'll close that. So in my eyes, no. There's lots of factors in this. Grey squirrels and red squirrels have very different habitats. Sort of coniferous, you know, conifer type things, fir trees, that kind of thing. That's what a red squirrel likes. That's its happy place. Guess what? We haven't got any of that. We've got very little of that, because, you know, the humans have consumed everything, chopped everything down for their own building projects or whatever, that they haven't had the forethought to replenish in time. They haven't got any, you know, where do they thrive? Let's have a think. I think they thrive on Anglesey. You know, it's kind of, it's out on its own. It's very easy to kind of do something to help squirrels. It's out on its own. You know, you've only got one way in, one way out. You know, if you want to have a squirrel habitat in Anglesey, I'm sure it's Anglesey, then brilliant. Where else are squirrels, red squirrels doing well in the UK? And there are probably other areas in the UK than the ones I'm mentioning. Scotland, they're doing better. Cumbria, the Lake District around there, again doing better. What have they got? Well, you know, the Lake District isn't called the Lake District because it's nice and sunny all the time, but you know, it is. It also has a good amount of rainfall. Same with Scotland. The climate is different. You know, there's less population, more, you know, the type of trees that a squirrel likes, that's where they are. That's where they thrive. They're not going to thrive where there's nowhere to live. You know, and yes, you got the grey squirrel problem as well. And I would just want to say this, that grey squirrels do suffer from squirrel pox as well. It's not as common as the reds, but, you know, it is a problem for reds and greys. It really is. It's not just one-sided. Let's think about the greys. Why have we got greys? Well, we've got greys because, you know, rich nobility and people, probably in Victorian times or maybe before or slightly after. I think I've got a D in history. You know, I'm not an expert at this, but I know my squirrels. So yeah, we imported them as novelties. You know, places like sort of Nebworth House, and places like that. It was a novelty. Oh, look, this wonderful thing. You know, again, it's been brought here from, you know, what we have is called the eastern grey squirrel in this country. There is a western grey squirrel, but we have the eastern. I think it comes from the sort of Americas. You know, rich people brought them over without any sort of thought about what's going to happen when they start breeding. You know, it's a wild animal. You let it loose in a park, it's going to breed, and they're going to sort of spread. You know, and that's no fault of the squirrel. That's what they do. The fault is humans who have cocked everything up by meddling where they shouldn't be meddling, chopping down the habitats. And yeah, if there's nowhere for the reds to live in the south, they have to go to where they can survive and thrive, and that's in, you know, fir tree country, you know, up north, Anglesey, you know, places like that. And again, there's other places, I'm sure. Grey squirrels prefer sort of broadleaf trees, oak trees, things which aren't evergreens, basically. They both make sort of their drays in the top of trees. That's where they live and raise their young and all the rest of it. You know, I'm rambling here. It's turned from a bed video to nature watch. But I'm very passionate about this because people blame the greys for the demise of the reds, and it's not the case. You know, if you want to blame somebody, blame humanity, because we're the ones who are meddling in things. And is it fair to kill all the greys to let the reds survive? No, absolutely it isn't. Because guess what? If you got rid of all the greys overnight, what's going to happen? Where the reds going to survive? Where they're currently surviving, because there's no habitat for them anywhere else. You know, you just lose so much by trying to correct what we've already ruined. And I think it's worth bearing in mind, because the reds were pretty much hunted to extinction by the humans at the same time as bringing in greys and other stuff. You know, there's a bounty on the heads. We virtually killed our own indigenous red squirrel. What you see now is not, you know, there might be a handful of, you know, distant relatives, but what you've got now is Scandinavian red squirrels who've been brought in because we lost our own. So we're doing it again. You know, don't get me wrong, I love a red squirrel, I love a grey squirrel, I love all squirrels. They're all God's creation, they're all wonderful in my eyes. Neither of them are now native to the UK. So what are you going to do? Kill all of them? And then you haven't got any squirrels. You know, just leave them be. If you want to try and control a population of grey squirrels, you know, they're toying with the idea and trialing the idea of sort of contraception to stop them breeding. That is the kindest and most humane thing to do. It's not the squirrel's fault, it's humans' fault, and greed, and just not having any idea what we're doing, basically, and then thinking about it when it's too late. You know, you want to sort of eradicate the greys to keep the reds, because the greys aren't native. Well, our reds aren't native either, they're Scandinavian reds. We killed all ours at the same time as getting rid of all their forests and habitats and bringing in other things to replace them, and now we want to do the same. It's just idiotic. You know, if you want to try and help the reds, and I say I love a red squirrel. I was up in Cumbria 6 months ago. I saw a handful, it was a delight. Do I prefer them to greys? No. Are they very cute? Yes. Are greys very cute? Absolutely. But I think to get rid of the greys, you know, we'd lose so much, because they're everywhere. Because of us, they're everywhere. And you get rid of the greys because we don't like them. The reds still aren't going to survive because they've got nowhere to live. So I'm going to stop waffling and get off my soapbox. But I know a lot about squirrels. If you have one living in your bedroom with you for 4 years, you tend to do your research, because you have to. You know, yes, they might eat your bed, but I tell you what, I'd rather have a squirrel in my bedroom as a guest than a lot of other things. You know, she was very well trained. She was pretty much litter trained. She had a cage that she went in night. She took herself to bed. You know, when it got dark outside, we would sort of creep up there, and you know, you could handle this thing like a little baby, because she, you know, effectively we were her parent and she was our child. That's the way we saw her and the way she saw us. It got dark, you know, we'd say goodnight, take her up a little snack and whatnot. We'd turn off the bedroom light, she'd hop into her cage, and the only reason there was a cage, because she was free ranging in the day. You know, you can't keep a wild animal caged. You know, we would have ideally released her, but it was too late. We didn't know she was a squirrel until she started getting the bushy tail. And again, you're not allowed to. But at that stage, you know, we're not going to euthanize God's creation. So she lived with us until she died of natural causes, and it broke our hearts. But yeah, she took herself to bed. We turned the light off. She'd hop into her cage, and then when me and my better half, Michelle, came to bed, we'd literally walk into the bedroom, close the door of her cage, and the only reason she was caged overnight is, you know, animals wake up, you know, at dawn. If I'm trying to get ready for work, it's not very easy when you've got a squirrel sitting on your head, giving you, you know, licking you and stuff, and it was a delight. But you know, I just never go to work, because that's like the most fantastic thing in the world. So that's the only reason she was in a cage, is primarily so I could get up and go to work. My better half is the zookeeper, and yeah, she could when Michelle woke up, she would let her out the cage, see to her needs, you know, make sure everything was clean, give her food, give her water, you know, play with her, you know, all the things that children need, you know, because it's an animal which is dependent on you. She can't do anything for herself, because she's a captive animal, so you have to do it for her. You know, even when we first got her, you know, it was feeding schedules. You know, initially none of us thought she was going to survive, but then it was waking up every sort of hour and a half, 2 hours, you know, throughout the weeks and months as she was growing up, because we're mum, you know, and you have to be mum. They're best off with their mum, but we didn't know who the mum was, and you know, we thought she was a rat. So I can't remember what I was saying, but yeah, you have to be mum. Even very basic things, you know, a squirrel can't go to the toilet on its own until it's old enough. Mum will sort of lick their areas and they will pee and poo, you know, and obviously we're not going to do that. But you have, you know, you're there with cotton buds and other things. You're there, you know, with syringes feeding them things. Then, you know, as they're kind of weaning almost, you know, you're trying them off with sort of pine nuts, and, you know, you have to give them a varied diet, but obviously also bear in mind that, you know, things aren't like they are in the wild. So what did she eat? Hazelnuts, pecan nuts, pistachio nuts, not really peanuts, they're junk food for squirrels, you know, lots of nuts. You know, that is something she had. Vegetables, fresh vegetables. You have to do your research. Some things they can eat, some things they can't. You know, we gave her a coconut once, she loved it. You know, when she saw snow for the first time, we brought some in, and she loved it and played with it. And, you know, she used to like her little squashes and pumpkins when it was around, you know, Halloween and things like that. Christmas time, well, you know, nuts, typically they were sort of loose nuts, but they were sort of healthy nuts from sort of health food suppliers. Christmas time, when you get nuts in shells, again, their teeth never stop growing. You need to help them with that. Obviously, trees, bark, other things, other sort of natural things that they'd come across in the wild, mushrooms. You know, you've got to make sure things aren't poisonous. You know, give them a varied diet. Give her a varied diet. Give her a varied diet. Yeah, and we did that, and when she died, we were absolutely beside ourselves. And you know, it's like when a child dies, because to me, you know, and this sounds horrible, but having children is a normal thing for a lot of people. Some people can't have children, and I'm very sorry for that. Some people don't have a problem, don't have difficulty conceiving. I met my wife when we're both in our sort of mid-40s. It was, you know, Michelle had a previous marriage with 2 beautiful kids. You know, we can't have any more sort of natural children because of age and whatnot. Squidge was our baby, and when she died, it's like part of us died. But, you know, gradually, it's not easy. You know, we were, and we still are. Oh, battery warning. I'm really gonna have to wrap this up now. You know, we were and still are heartbroken. But you know, you just got to think of the good, the positive. You know, bonding with a wild animal like that, who you can hold in your hands and stroke her to sleep. She went to the shops with us. She went out for meals with us when she was a baby in a little carrier bag. You know, if we go out to a pub or something for an evening meal, she'd come with us, because, you know, what are you going to do? She's dependent. She'd come with us, and my wife would sneak her off into the baby changing or whatnot, and, you know, she'd have her little food when we're waiting for our food, and, you know, give her a little stroke, and she'll sort of crawl up back to sleep, and, you know, in her little makeshift dray. And you know, you got to do these things. And we've had many animals brought to us, and I'm just going to mention one more before our 2 more before my battery finally goes. Our male cat Sprocket, who is an absolute delight, brings us things. You know, cats bring things, it's what they do. Yes, we've had birds, we've had shrews, we've had mice, we've probably had frogs, we've had a squirrel. Actually, we've had more than one squirrel, but, you know, some of them arrive, you know, and you don't know if it's been injured with the animal. You know, it could have fallen out of a tree, you know, and they've got injured doing that. You just don't know. But he was a very gentle cat. He brought back a egg, fell out of a nest, an unhatched egg. We incubated, hatched, It was a pigeon. You know, we were pigeon parents at the same time as squirrel parents, and yeah, eventually, you know, I would have another pigeon in a heartbeat. But you know, you're allowed to release pigeons, and we released the pigeon. Her name was, well, we had, the first one was Flap Flap, and the second pigeon we had was brought to us because we were now known for helping pigeons that need help. So the first one was Flap Flap, the second one was Squeak. Both of those got released, so that was a delight. Again, there's loss, but there's joy, because you know the animals, a bird is allowed to thrive. It's not illegal to release them, so we did that. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, yeah, Sprocket brought us back a baby guinea pig. Yes. Where do you find a guinea pig? Someone dumped them, because our cat was not the only one to bring back baby guinea pigs. As you know, guinea pigs are very social animals. You cannot, or you should not, keep them alone. They will not have a good time. So we had to buy a guinea pig from a pet shop so we could have the two girls together. And yeah, Pickle and Piglet. So yeah, when you've got cats, and we've got 3 cats in total. Sprocket, ironically, was the only one we went out and bought. One we rescued from a chap who was unable to care for his kitten, so we took in the kitten. It needed urgent veterinary help. And our other, the one that, the kitten we took in, his name is Lucky Lou. We named him Lucky Lou because he was lucky he didn't perish. The chap was not in a good place, and he wouldn't have lasted any longer, really. And the final cat we've got, who is an absolute delight, she is an OAP cat now. Her name is Pixie, and yeah, she's a neighbourhood cat who has gone round the round several times. Decided that we are a soft touch and a good fit for her lifestyle, so we are cat parents to 3 cats as well. And yeah, it's a busy life, but I wouldn't want to give it up. And my beautiful wife is the zookeeper. I go out to work, and she does everything else, including trying to clear up after all these animals, which is not easy. And I need to help out more, because it's not easy. Anyway, enough waffling about animals. Right, what have we got? Turn this camera around, and we have black. Is it nice? Not really. Is it strong? Yeah, it's gonna do. It's gonna work. So I'm not proud of it. Well, I am proud of it, because you know, it had 2 choices. Either it was destined for the scrap, or it was fixable. You know, with an afternoon's work, a bit of know-how, even if it's self-taught know-how, a lot of cable ties, God, who makes all things possible, including fixing Chinese bed frames, as well as hand raising pigeons and squirrels and everything in between, guinea pigs as well. Yeah, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. I'm very happy. That is the final video. I will take a photo of the bed once it's back together, but I'll probably have to clear away my dirty undies first, because you don't want to see that. So that's it. Video next, and that's it. All right. Bye.